It began with a discovery buried beneath centuries of silence. In a small chamber near Assos, a team of archaeologists unearthed what appeared to be an ancient scroll case sealed in lead. Inside, dust, fragments of papyrus, and a faint symbol, the mark of Aristotle. But what was strange wasn't the find itself. It was what the inscription claimed. The words carved faintly on the lid read, "Not for the eyes of kings." That single line ignited a storm among historians. For centuries, we've known Aristotle as the philosopher who shaped logic, science, and reason. But this hinted at something else. A secret collection of writings so dangerous, his own followers tried to erase them. What knowledge could be so forbidden that even a philosopher of truth would want it hidden? To uncover that, we must travel back more than 2,300 years to the age when Greece stood at the edge of empire and reason stood at war with belief. Athens, 323 BC. The world had just heard the impossible. Alexander the Great was dead. And in his death, chaos spread. His empire fractured. Generals turned on one another. And in the shadows of the library of Lyceum, Aristotle was preparing to vanish. He was old now, weary, hunted even. The same Athenians who once celebrated his wisdom now called him a blasphemer. They said his teachings mocked the gods, that he questioned divine order itself. Aristotle knew what had happened to his teacher, Socrates, and whispered to his students, "I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy." And so, under the cover of night, he fled, taking with him not all, but a few chosen scrolls. Not his public works, the ethics, politics, or poetics, but writings he never meant for kings or priests. Texts so bold, they questioned the foundations of existence itself. For years, these writings vanished into legend. But ancient sources, Strabo, Plutarch, and the scholar Andronicus of Rhodes, hint at something extraordinary. They wrote that Aristotle's private works, hidden after his death, contained knowledge that defied religion and predicted scientific laws centuries ahead of their time. But there's more. In one letter preserved in the Vatican archives, a monk from the 9th century claimed that a philosopher's codex was hidden beneath Mount Athos, sealed by disciples of forbidden wisdom. He described symbols of stars, measurements of the cosmos, and words written in a script not from mortal kings. Was this the same scroll that warned, "Not for the eyes of kings"? Modern historians have debated what these writings might contain. Some say they were Aristotle's final meditations on the nature of soul, the eternity of the universe, and the divine as reason, not God. Others believe they contained early theories of atomic motion or blueprints of mechanical inventions the world wasn't ready for. But there's a darker possibility. What if these forbidden scrolls weren't about science at all, but power? In Aristotle's time, knowledge wasn't just enlightenment. It was control. The idea that nature followed predictable laws, that fate could be reasoned with, was a direct threat to kings, priests, and oracles alike. If a man could understand the order of the universe, he no longer needed divine permission. And that, perhaps, was Aristotle's most dangerous idea. There's a record, rare, disputed, and nearly lost, written by Demetrius of Phalerum, one of Aristotle's students. It tells of a night before his master's death when Aristotle gathered a small circle and spoke of a hidden doctrine he called the unmoved thought. To know the world, Aristotle said, is to rival the gods themselves. According to Demetrius, Aristotle then locked away several of his scrolls, instructing that they be hidden until mankind was ready to see without fear. What were those scrolls? And why did even his closest students swear oaths to never reveal them? Centuries later, in 200 BC, a Pelican of Teos supposedly discovered Aristotle's hidden manuscripts buried beneath a house in Sepsis, in Asia Minor. They were worm-eaten, faded but intact. A Pelican took them to Athens, where they were eventually seized by Sulla, the Roman general, and carried to Rome. There in secret archives, philosophers and priests studied them and locked them away again. Why? Because they contained something Rome could not risk spreading, something that could shatter both religion and empire. And so, the writings disappeared once more. Until now, that lead scroll found in Assos bore the same symbol Aristotle used for his metaphysics, a circle divided by a single line, meaning the unity of opposites. Inside the fragments, one phrase stood out, barely readable, but chilling. The prime intellect is not divine, is human. Was this the essence of the forbidden teaching, that gods were only projections of human thought? If so, Aristotle had crossed a line even Socrates dared not. And if this fragment is authentic, it could rewrite everything we know about the dawn of Western thought. But this discovery also raises a question few dare to ask. Who hid these writings, and why did they want them found now? The news of the Assos scroll spread quietly, only among scholars, historians, and a handful of governments. No official statement, no press release. Just silence. Because the moment those words were deciphered, the prime intellect is not divine. It is human. Something ancient began to stir. It wasn't the first time such a phrase had surfaced. Centuries earlier, fragments of similar lines had appeared in obscure manuscripts in Byzantine libraries, all referring to something called the second philosophy. But no one knew what that meant. Until now. To uncover this mystery, we return to Aristotle's final years, when he lived in exile in Chalcis, far from Athens. His health was failing, but his mind, restless as ever, was absorbed in one last obsession, the essence of consciousness. He had spent decades explaining the natural world, logic, physics, ethics, but now he turned inward. He began to write what he called the thoughts beyond thought. His students whispered that he believed mind itself was the true engine of the cosmos, not gods, not fate, not divine will, but intelligence born from nature. In one alleged fragment of these lost works, Aristotle wrote, "The universe does not think of man, but man thinks of the universe, and thus creates the gods." Such a line would have been heresy in the temples of Delphi or among the priests of Zeus. But Aristotle was past caring. He had seen too much of war, politics, and divine manipulation. He understood that those who claimed to speak for gods were often the ones controlling kings. Years later, these hidden ideas found their way to a group known only in ancient sources as the Noetic Circle. According to Plutarch, this secret order claimed descent from Aristotle's final students. They guarded his private doctrines and met only in hidden chambers beneath old temples. Their creed was simple yet radical. Truth is not revealed. It is reasoned. The circle believed that if humanity ever embraced pure reason, every empire built on faith would fall. They copied Aristotle's forbidden writings in ciphered language, half Greek, half mathematical code, and spread them across the Mediterranean. But when the early Christian scholars began rising in power, the circle was hunted down. Its manuscripts were declared blasphemous. Some were burned. Others were hidden in monasteries, disguised as harmless theological texts. And then, one by one, they disappeared from history. That silence lasted over 1,000 years. Until, in Baghdad, during the 9th century, the House of Wisdom began translating ancient Greek texts. The caliphs of the Abbasid dynasty, fascinated by philosophy, sought out every scroll they could find, and among them was a strange manuscript called the Book of the Intellect. It had no author, but it carried ideas unmistakably Aristotelian and disturbingly advanced. It spoke of invisible forces, motion in the void, and a world governed by law, not divine will. It was so controversial that later Islamic scholars, like Al-Ghazali, condemned it as a deception that invites men to believe they are gods. Was the Book of the Intellect actually part of Aristotle's forbidden writings? If so, it means his secret knowledge had not died. It had simply changed hands. Centuries passed, and then came the Renaissance. In 1462, an Italian humanist named Cardinal Bessarion received a strange shipment from the East, several damaged scrolls in Greek and Syriac. One of them carried a familiar mark, a circle bisected by a single line. Inside were only fragments, but they were enough to terrify the church. They described a realm beyond heaven where intellect alone is eternal, and claimed that to think is to create reality. This was not philosophy. It was a challenge to theology itself. If Aristotle had indeed written these words, then he wasn't just the father of logic. He was the first man to suggest that creation was a human act, not divine. And yet, rather than destroy the texts, the Church did something even stranger. They hid them. Locked in the Vatican secret archives, under a category marked Index Obscurum Philosophorum, the list of dark philosophers. Why keep what they feared? Perhaps because, like all power, knowledge is most dangerous when understood. In 1891, an archaeologist named Charles Waddington, working near Ephesus, claimed to have found a coded papyrus matching descriptions of Aristotle's lost works. But before his findings could be published, he vanished, his notes seized by Ottoman authorities. His assistant, years later, wrote that Waddington had uncovered an idea so simple, yet so catastrophic, it would turn all philosophy to dust. He called it the law of self-causation, the notion that existence could arise from itself, that the universe did not need a creator. Fast forward to the present. When the Assos scroll was analyzed using multispectral imaging, researchers discovered faint overlapping scripts, Greek, Syriac, and Arabic. Some lines corresponded almost word for word with the Book of the Intellect found in Baghdad. The scroll wasn't just authentic. It was part of the same lineage of forbidden knowledge stretching across continents and centuries. And then came a discovery even more unsettling. Inside the scroll tube's inner lining, etched so faintly it escaped the first scans, was an inscription, returned at the end of the Age of Kings. Someone, centuries ago, hid these words for a future they believed would come. A time when kings would fall, empires would crumble, and human reason would finally stand alone. Was that time now? If Aristotle foresaw that the world would one day reject divine authority in favor of human intellect, then the modern age itself, our science, our machines, our endless logic, may not be a coincidence. It may be his prophecy fulfilled. But there's still one mystery left. If Aristotle's forbidden writings were meant to resurface only at the end of the Age of Kings, who decided it was time? And where's the rest of his secret philosophy now? The storm truly began when the Assos fragments were carbon dated. The results were shocking. 4th century BC, authentic beyond dispute. But even more remarkable were the ink patterns. Chemical analysis revealed that the writings weren't just by a single hand. They were layered, rewritten over centuries, each generation adding, interpreting, and protecting the words of Aristotle. It wasn't a book. It was a relay, a philosophical time capsule passed from one civilization to the next. And the last layer of ink wasn't ancient at all. It dated to the 13th century AD. Someone in medieval Europe had reopened Aristotle's forbidden manuscript and written a message. That final inscription, when translated, read, "He who understands this commands the real." The phrase sent waves of debate through the academic world. Some dismissed it as metaphor. Others saw it as the purest expression of the idea Aristotle hinted at, that consciousness shapes reality. But among a small circle of scholars, another theory took root. What if Aristotle's final doctrine, the so-called second philosophy, was never meant as abstract thought at all? What if it was a practical method? To trace that possibility, one must look to the mysterious Codex Noeticus, a book said to have circulated among Renaissance alchemists and Hermetic thinkers. Written in a strange hybrid of Greek and Latin, it described a method of perceiving without mediation. Its author was anonymous, but several passages were nearly identical to Aristotle's phrasing into anima and the metaphysics. The Codex claimed that the human mind, when perfectly disciplined, could align itself with the structure of the universe, bending probability and perception. The thinker, it said, is not in the world is in the thinker. To the Church, such an idea was pure heresy. To the modern scientist, it sounded eerily familiar, a crude echo of quantum observation, centuries before its time. Was Aristotle the first to suggest that reality responds to the observer? In Florence, 1499, the scholar Marsilio Ficino wrote a private letter mentioning the buried truth of the master of Stagira, Aristotle's birthplace. Ficino warned that certain of Aristotle's teachings can dissolve the veil between mind and matter. Soon after, his home was raided by agents of the Dominican Inquisition, and the letter vanished from record. Yet one of his students, Pico della Mirandola, escaped with several cryptic notes. Among them, a drawing of a divided circle, the same emblem found on the Assos scroll, and beneath it the words, Nos summus principium, we are the beginning. The pattern was undeniable. Across ages and languages, the same message whispered, the divine is not above us. It is within us. By the 17th century, the forbidden Aristotelian tradition had quietly merged with early natural philosophy. Thinkers like Giordano Bruno, Descartes, and Spinoza were accused of reviving the secret doctrine of reason over revelation. Bruno, burned alive in Rome, was said to possess Greek papers that vanished with him. It seems every age had its guardian and its martyr, and now perhaps it is our turn. In the digital era, parts of the Assos text were scanned, decrypted, and cross-referenced with lost manuscripts cataloged under the Vatican's Index Obscurum Philosophorum. The alignment was unmistakable. Line by line, the fragments reconstructed a lost treatise believed to be Aristotle's final work, its title partially legible. Pi epsilon rho nu omicron ta omicron delta epsilon upsilon tau omicron upsilon on the second intellect. What it contained could change our entire understanding of Western thought. Its thesis, according to translations leaked in academic circles, was simple yet staggering. The cosmos is the reflection of intellect. To know perfectly is to make real. Ignorance is the veil between being and becoming. If authentic, this would mean Aristotle anticipated not only the concept of scientific causation, but also the philosophy of creation through perception, a bridge between science and spirituality thousands of years ahead of its time. But the story takes one last, haunting turn. Weeks after the findings were made public, the lead researcher on the Assos project, Dr. Helena Petro, was found missing. Her lab in Thessaloniki was sealed. The digital archives containing high-resolution scans of the fragments were wiped clean, deleted remotely. The only remaining image of the scroll is a single blurred photograph, leaked before the blackout. And the funding for the excavation? It had come from a private foundation calling itself the Lyceum Reborn. No one knows who runs it. So we are left with questions, the kind Aristotle himself would have savored. Were these writings truly his? Or were they centuries of seekers projecting their own forbidden hopes onto his name? Did Aristotle, the father of logic, really believe that human intellect could create reality, or was it merely his followers' ultimate act of faith in reason? Either way, the message endures. The prime intellect is not divine. It is human. If that line is true, then perhaps Aristotle's greatest heresy wasn't against the gods at all, but against the limits of the human mind. And maybe, just maybe, that's why his words were hidden, until the age when mankind would finally dare to believe them. Story finished.